Hi everybody, I'm Christian Trombone. This is presentation 2 for Economics 112 with Professor Stroud. To start off, we'll talk about some trade deficit. So what is a trade deficit? A trade deficit happens when a country imports more goods and services than it exports, which means that more money is leaving the country to pay for foreign products than we're receiving for our own products going to foreign countries. Um, this could be caused by a strong consumer demand or weak export competitiveness. And over time, a if a trade deficit is constant, it can force a country to borrow from others or cause its currency to even lose value. An example of a trade deficit that I have here would be if the United States imports $500 million worth of goods from China, but only exports 200 million back. Its result is a trade deficit of $300 million. A trade surplus. What is a trade surplus? Trade surplus happens when a country's exports exceeds its imports. So this is just the complete opposite of what a trade deficit is. And again, the same opposite, leading to more money coming in than going out. Um, this can happen if the export performance is strong or if the demand for imports is very low. Over time, a trade surplus that is constant can increase a country's foreign exchange reserves and strengthen the currency. And then an example of this would be if the United States exports $500 million worth of goods, but imports only $300 million. It has a trade surplus of $200 million. So clearly the difference between trade surplus and trade deficit is very eminent, and it's literally the complete opposite. Just everything is just flipped. Next, we take a look at the United States and we try to see what the United States exhibits, whether they run a trade surplus or a trade deficit. And in fact, the United States operates a trade deficit. They import more goods and services than it exports annually. This deficit is largely due to significant imports of electronics, automotives, and consumer products, despite them having a surplus in services like technology and finances. Um, in recent years, the U.S. trade deficit has amounted to hundreds of billions of dollars annually, mainly and primarily with countries like China, Germany, and Mexico. Um, More money is leaving the U.S. each year to pay for foreign goods than comes in from exports. Now we get into the pre 1930s conventional economic wisdom, which is classical economics. So, classical economists believe that economies are self regulating and naturally stabilized when they're at full employment. They adhered to Say's law, which which is basically the belief that supply would create its own demand, meaning that like the production generates through revenue to kind of facilitate other purchases. These economists during the time advocated for minimal government intervention and maintaining balanced budgets. Um, they focused on long-term stability, viewing recessions as temporary, with wages and price self-correcting over time. So next here we have the Keynesian economics, and this emerged after the Great Depression, and so basically when the Great Depression in the 1930s hit, it challenged classical economic theories as nobody could really explain the prolonged unemployment and how the economy was so stagnant during the time. Um, the Keynesian theories were founded by John Maynard Keynes. He questioned all the ideas of really of the classical terms and all the classical views, and he did so in his book that he made in 1936. It was named the General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. This eventually ended up becoming the foundation for this type of Keynesian economics. And like I said, John Keynes really just went completely the opposite of how classical theories and how everybody believed and looked at economics. He argued that economies could fall into long-term recessions due to market failures and advocated for government intervention through fiscal policies. Some of these fiscal policies he he advocated for were public spending, tax cuts, and stimulate economic activity. Unlike the classical perspective, Keynes emphasized that total spending determines output and employment, asserting that during low demand, businesses reduce output. This ultimately leads to job losses and further economic decline. And John says that this is a cycle that only government intervention can break. So he's really eminent on the fact that the government needs to intervene and that the government needs to include itself if the economy is going to work and stay and build off of itself. Here we have some more on the Keynesian economics. Um, Keynes really criticized the classical economics and with the fact that he didn't care about the immediate issues such as mass employment. Keynesian economics is really just concerned with long-term equilibrium, but with short-term fluctuations. So, I mean, what's going on in his case, what's going on right now is not the immediate issue for him. He's really worrying about the future and how we could build up the economy so well that it stays well for a very long time. Um, Keynes also proposed that the application of fiscal policy, which is, like I said, state expenditure and taxations, and to a smaller degree, monetary policy, which is interest rates and money supply, in order to even out the fluctuations in the business. Um, so, what I have here is basically, in a nutshell, the classical economics before the 1930s had faith in the market to regulate itself and had no feeling of government involvement, whereas Keynes and the Keynesian economics viewed the active involvement of government as an important aspect to regulate the demand and stabilize the economy. So Keynes was really heavily viewed on the fact that the government needs to intervene and the government needs to get involved in the economy in order for it to flourish. Um, the classical to Keynesian thinking was a fundamental change in the contemporary economic policy and theory. So here we have monetary versus fiscal policy. On the left, we have monetary policy. This involves the control of money supply and interest rates by a central bank, whereas the fiscal policy involves government spending and taxation decisions, typically controlled by the president and Congress. Back on the left, with monetary policy, we have lowering rates make borrowing cheaper, encouraging spending and investing. Raising them helps control inflation, whereas through the fiscal policy, increasing public projects like infrastructure, education, or defense to create jobs and stimulate demand. Back with monetary policy, the main goal is to stabilize prices, promote employment, and ensure moderate long-term interest rates. Whereas for the fiscal policy, the main goal is to influence overall demand, employment, and economic growth through changes in government budgets. And lastly, the difference we have here is that during a recession, low interest rates boost spending and investment during inflation. Raising rates helps slow excessive demand. And we have Governments can increase spending or cut taxes to boost demand. In times of high inflation, may reduce spending or raise taxes to boost the economy. Here we have the business cycle. The business cycle basically determines the natural rise and fall of economic activity in a market economy, which reflects periods of growth and decline, more known as expansion and decline. Expansion and recession. These cycles are measured by fluctuations in real GDP, employment, production, and income levels. During an expansion, economic activity increases, with businesses producing more, jobs being created, and consumer spending rising until it reaches its peak at full capacity. And its peak is the highest point on the cycle. On the other hand, during a downturn, economic activity slows, with production, employment, and spending decreasing until the cycle hits its lowest point, and its lowest point is known as the trough. Lastly, for today, we have expansion and recession, and really highlight the difference between the two and what each mean. So basically, here we have an expansion is a period of economic growth when the economy is improving and overall activity increases, whereas in a recession is a period of economic decline when overall activity in the economy slows down. During an expansion is characterized by rising GDP, lower unemployment, higher consumer confidence, and increased business investment, whereas during a recession, this is usually marked by falling GDP, higher unemployment, reducing consumer spending, and lower business investment. During an expansion, businesses grow, jobs are created, and incomes rise. Whereas during a recession, businesses produce less because demand drops, leading to job losses and slower income growth. And lastly, here we have expansions are part of the upward phase of the business cycle, whereas obviously recessions are part of the downward phase of the business cycle. That is all that I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed presentation 2 for Economics 112. Thank you.